Hello everyone. It's very good to meet you all through this live session, wherein we can try and discuss about one of the very tricky papers in CA final first group, because the other two people, whoever have spoken, they've given enough amount of knowledge about how to go with FR and SFM, which are way too scoring, and we understand that. But when it comes to audit, advanced auditing and professional ethics, the name itself, sounds, kind of very dramatic, wherein it's auditing, though you have seen in CA Inter, it's kind of advanced here with the combination of professional ethics which is coming from the CA Act. So it's a complete 100 marks paper, and most people, even if you look at the marks, that the best of the best score, that is even when you pick up the rankers totals, I've seen most number of times that they score very less only when it comes to audit. And sometimes it's so dramatic that some of the top line rankers, their scores of audit are in 40s and 50s. Having said that, we also have others who are scoring 60 plus in CA final, and I am telling you, to be very honest with you guys, if you are scoring somewhere around 60 plus to, of course, any number of marks that you desire, it's a very commendable effort in CA final audit. Considering the last two attempts, because in the last two attempts what has happened is we have MCQs for 30 marks, so the possibility of scoring has also gone very high. Okay, before that, if I'm talking about a couple of years back, wherein when whatever effort the student puts up and gives his best, is still getting 60s is a big challenge. But right now it's not the case, because you have this 30 mark slot, which is kind of really going to boost your marks to a great extent. And not only that, there are going to be a lot of questions in your paper which are based on standards and sections, and if you are thorough with them, you can possibly make a great amount of marks nowadays. So let me first start with the fundamental point that generally everybody wants to go with. Should I go for MCQs, or should I be apt on my descriptive part first, so that I can come back in the end and do the MCQs? Now you know that there shouldn't be any kind of a doubt here, right? And most of you try to do this by starting the MCQs, which is the best idea to do, because you have, but as of now there is no negative marking. So what I suggest you guys is not to kind of miss anything out of the 30. I'll give you 3 ways here how to deal with MCQs, very important in terms of a paper like audit, because when it comes to solving problems you need a different technique, but when it comes to answering these kind of MCQs, now most of you might be still in the confusion that is MCQ going to be easy, is it a boon or is it a danger? Take it from me, with all my experience, I'm saying that it's kind of a mix of both. Some MCQs where the moment you see them you will be able to recognize the answer, so it kind of gets you that 1 mark. But sometimes it does confuse you, so you might end up marking a wrong answer, and you might lose marks straight. So this kind of is a very tricky question. Is MCQs good or not really? But then let's try and make the best out of that by giving you 3 simple ways of how do you go about MCQs. First one, now also I want to add up here that right now the case based MCQs are being introduced. Now case based MCQs are nothing but they're going to give you a paragraph and give you the presentation of the case, and then they are going to ask you to explain the answers for those questions from the case. 5 or 6 questions will be pulled out from each case study. Now please be clear of one fact: whether it's a case study based MCQ or simply 30 MCQs, they are all going to depend on your understanding of the concept. This is not English comprehension where answers are going to be there in that paragraph that you read. That paragraph that you read is just a guidance. There a case situation is explained, that's all. And that paragraph will not be giving you the answers. So it's not like if we read the paragraph, we'll find answers in the paragraph and we'll choose 1 out of the 4. It's definitely not going to be like that. So first and foremost thing, I don't want you to waste a lot of time in reading that paragraph with complete detail. Okay, give a newspaper reading, like how we have a cursory glance. That's it, that's good enough. Because why I am emphasizing on a cursory glance of that question is, when you read the MCQs, if you feel that there is anything that you have to go back to that particular part of the paragraph and pick up, you can then pick up. Otherwise, some people they get carried away by reading that lengthy paragraph. They spend all their time in reading the paragraph, and then they realize that the 5 MCQs or 6 MCQs that are asked are nowhere relevant to the paragraph. because you can answer them. I mean, sometimes there are chances you can answer the MCQs without even reading the paragraph. That's only a chance. I'm not saying you should do that, but sometimes, because the MCQs are still going to be concept based, but sometimes they are context based also, which is why I wrote my first point here. We're talking about context based MCQs, wherein very few questions. Now, like say they gave a case about X Limited. What should X Limited do in this regard? Which of these options should X Limited choose? So, what is X Limited doing? If you know that, then whether X Limited did something which is correct or not. So, if they are asking you questions like that, then it will be easy for you to choose one of those four. Now, the first and foremost thing about MCQs is you will know the answer simply because you know the concept. That is, once you finish reading the question, there are four options, so you will be able to select the right option. That is because you know the answer the moment you read the question. This is one way of answering an MCQ. The moment you finish reading the question, you will obviously be able to guess the answer. Then go and read all the four options. Go and read all the four options, even if the option A is the answer. Now, this is a bad habit I have seen with people, that if the option is A or B or till wherever the right answer is, unless the answer is D, I don't see many people reading all four options. Most people, they get carried away the moment they see the right option. And generally MCQ are also framed in such a manner that A tends to be the answer or B tends to be the answer. Then most people, they are getting convinced there itself. They are not going further to read. And A possibly can be a misleading one also. So don't jump to a conclusion immediately when you read option A. All I want you guys to do is to have a thorough understanding of the question, plus take 5 seconds extra in each bit. It's not going to really harm the time. We have ample amount of time. We will discuss how to handle that as well. So taking 5-10 seconds extra in reading, because see, the wordings are going to be very tricky, and we have limits in the nature of time limits in the nature of days, fines. We have various penalties discussed. So want you to be very critical on each one of this. So that is the first thing. Now, second type of MCQs are those MCQs where they are going to ask you to choose one out of the four. Right? First one, simply you will get the answer because you know the concept. Second one is choose one out of the four. Choose one out of the four are those type of questions where they will tell you select which of these is a correct statement or select which of these is an incorrect statement. They are going to do this. Here you have no option but to read all four statements. Even in this case, if A is the answer, still I want you guys to read all four options, because most people, as I told you, the moment they find right answer, they don't want to confuse themselves more. So anyway, I got to this conclusion that this answer is right, so I will immediately go and mark. That is why they don't want to read. I've asked people, why are you not tending to read the other two options? No sir, B is clear. No, if I read C and D, I may get confused, and I'm very sure that B is the answer. So without even reading C and D, if you are very sure that B is the answer, I think you are taking a big risk. And at final level, I don't think you should play with the numbers like that. So make sure that you read four options, and all the four options, once you consider them, then identify which is the correct statement or the wrong statement. Normally only these two type of questions will be there in the exam, which you can generally deal with. Now sometimes it may so happen that if you apply these options in the question, you will be able to find out what the answer is. Now that's rare when it comes to subjects like audit and law, because if it was mathematics, back in time when you did mathematics MCQs, you used to take all the four options that are given and substitute in the equation given in the question, and you will find X. That's how we used to do, right? When they say find X, we will take the value of X and all four options and put it in the question. Whichever suits the question, will mark that as the answer. That was easy. But here you can't do that. Which section number or which option the line is coming complete, you can't check like that. Here grammatical variations are also very important. So when I'm reading the question along with option A, it seems to be the right answer. It seems to be quite different from it is. Okay, so don't simply substitute a option there and see, yeah, according to me this is sounding right. But rather than leaving an MCQ when you don't know the answer, you can try that approach. Fit in the option into the question and see whether it gets you the best result. Because while doing that, now again, this is not a very random technique which I'm telling, because sometimes using this technique also we have found success. I'll tell you how. When you substitute the particular option into the question while reading an MCQ, if you're putting an option into the question, you will find completeness to that question, and that is when you recollect what you actually read about that concept. Sometimes it happens when you read the question, you may not be immediately able to get the answer. If that was the case, you will straight away go to the particular box and mark the answer. But sometimes it doesn't happen. So in such a case, fix the answer into the question and see which out of the 4 options suits the best. Maybe while doing that, you may recollect which section you read or which standard you read, and that probably can help you a great deal when it comes to that. So the third option that I'm giving you here is fixing the options into the question. Fixing the options into the question. This you can do. This is a great technique when nothing works. No sir, we don't need your technique because our concepts are strong. Absolutely, you can finish it with one only, and depending on the question you can use option 2. So this is how you deal with this 30 marks of MCQs. Now this is absolutely the only thing that you should do. Don't go with a predetermined mindset that you will score only in MCQs and you can handle the 70 marks just like that. This impression saying that I will get 30 out of 30 here, and even if I'm able to manage 15 or 20 here, I'm still be able to get 50. No, trying to get 30 out of 30 here will be a student who can score well here also. So please be careful. Your MCQs are not something which is a tool to promote your 30 marks. They are still a test of knowledge in depth. So I want you to be very careful with this 30 marks. And if you are careful with the 30 marks, and able to do well there, you can be rest assured that if you write decent answers to these marks, you are going to cross that 60 plus mark very easily. Coming to these 70 marks, now first and foremost problem with the 70 marks is the time allocation. In audit you don't face that problem occasionally, but once in a while people do face issues of time. That's because they write lengthy answers which don't merit so much importance. I will clarify what I'm saying. So if you have 3 hours of time, how much time should you allocate for MCQs? Now generally in the past we had 6 questions before the MCQ pattern. We had 6 questions, first of which was 20 marks, and the balance 5 were 16 marks each. So 16 into 5 of 80 marks, and totally 100 marks. That's what you are supposed to do. That time we had allocated this 180 minutes divided by 6 questions, 30 minutes a question. That's what we used to do. But now that you have multiple choice questions of 30, so I'm taking that first slot of 120 plus 16, that is roughly around 1 hour's time, and allocating here. So I don't think MCQ should take roughly 50 minutes and on. At final level, if you guys are practicing well and going with all the concepts. Now one more alert that I want to give here is, before going to the exam, don't do thousands of MCQs, download. There's so much of material available on the web. Don't download all that and put yourself into complication. Yes, agreed, you have to practice MCQs and go. So you can try and answer the mock exam, RTPs. You can't do the past exam questions because they're not giving you the MCQ booklet, right? So yeah, free material is available, institute material, you can pick up mock papers, RTPs. Those MCQs, if you solve and go, they're more than enough. MCQs are totally concept based, guys. So you don't need, this is not any competitive exam like wherein you're writing CAT or GMAT where you need to go for a percentile. So here it's totally concept based. The more you are clear on concept, the better you will be able to answer them in the exam. So if my gut goes right, and I'm saying you should be able to finish it with a maximum of 50 minutes. I'm considering all extras and giving you 50 minutes for your 30 marks to be very, very safe. Because out of these 30, some questions don't even take more than 10 or 15 seconds. The moment you read, you will be able to figure them out easily. So I think that is going to be way more easier. But when it comes to some questions, now you have some 2-mark MCQs where you need a critical approach. And sometimes, they are giving you 4 or 5 options, and a combination of those options are your answers. Like for example, let me give you a question. Like say there is an MCQ, then they gave you 1, 2, 3, 4 situations. Of this 4, option A is 1 and 2. Have you seen these kind of questions? 2 and 3. Then option C is 3 and 4. And option D is only 4. Something like this. which of this is right in the context. So for this, it will take some good amount of time to read and understand the question, then read all these 4 points and then see which of this is the best combination. And here also you have a method called elimination method. Now like say for example, wherever option 2 is wrong, you believe that option 2 is not the answer. So straight away you can rule out this and this because in both those places 2 is there. And then you can find out what is the answer left over. Now this requires little time. Here I gave a very simple example, but in exam they can ask you, a slightly more complicated bit as well because they're giving you 2 marks just for writing one alphabet. So you have to be very, very careful when you come to these kind of questions. It may take a little time, not to worry about it. So don't rush in your MCQs part. You have still 2 hours and 10 minutes of time that is safely left out here because the balance 130 minutes are there for you to write these 70 marks, and that's not going to cost you so much also. I'm pretty sure with a 2-hour deadline you can complete the 70 marks very comfortably, that's what I'm saying, because I believe again here they're going to get you questions of 5 into 14, so 14 marks per question, probably 2 or 3 bits. Now generally what I'm seeing is in a 14 marks question, let's say question 2A, 2B, 2C, you're getting 3 bits of one of 6 marks, the other 2 of 4 marks. This is one way of asking. They're not going beyond 6. But sometimes the question is stretching, 3A, 3B. This is about 3 marks. And C and D are of again 4 marks each. Okay, so it depends how your 14 marks are being split. Sometimes it depends. Again, I'm not seeing 8 marks questions coming and all very big, so you don't have to really worry about it. But you got to be careful. Sometimes here also a 4 marks question is being split, like 3 and 3, then 2 and 2. So there where they are giving an internal choice sometimes. So lot of writing is required. So back home there needs to be a writing practice. I will tell you about the writing practice once we finish discussing about presentation. So this is how you deal with MCQs, the 30 marks. Now exclusively focusing on presentational aspects in this 70 marks. Let us talk about the first insight of context. Sir, what do you mean by context? I want you guys to keep the answer within the context. Do not write too many aspects because some people are losing marks because of writing unwanted content. Right? I have seen examiners' comments wherein they are mentioning that 2 prominent points always are there in the examiner's comments. 1, students have not understood the question correctly. 2, students have written lot of or irrelevant content. These 2 are always there in audit papers, examiners' comments. You know why? Because students fail to identify what is critical for them to write in the answer and what is not. So first, when you read, use your reading time carefully and be very sure. And here also I suggest you don't really worry spending extra 30 seconds in reading the question and deciding in your mind what to write. Because some students are kind of overconfident. I am already in CA final. I have done so many years of articleship. Who better can do audit than me? All good. It's good to build a confidence like that. But when it comes to exam, you have to behave like a student. You can't behave there like an auditor. Now that you have done audit for so many years, this is a problem I understand with final students exclusively because they believe that they've already finished auditing paper in Inter, so they very well know it. 2, they've almost finished 2.5 years, or some people even finished 3 years of articleship, and they've seen so much of audit, so they can write these answers very easily. And then that's where the first step of thing goes wrong with a student because they go too much out of a context. Because what happens practically when we do audits is quite different from a bookish answer. And here they are expecting you to answer the question to the point. Whether it's bookish or practical, that's really not relevant here. Knowledge from both the ends will help you do the answer, but keep it within the context. Because I've seen people write a 3 marks answer like they're writing an 8 marks answer. They write so much of content. It's not required. Now, that is where another question crops up. Sir, tell me then what should be the length? If 6 marks, because if you don't have to miss the context, then you have to bother about length. Because they both are interrelated, no? And also there is another point. Some people try to keep it very precise. They finish the 4 marks answer in 2 or 3 lines saying that is the answer. It's there. But there is a background on how you arrived that answer. So Writing is absolutely a skill, guys. You know this. You've already written inter exams. You are in final, which means you know what skill it takes to score great marks in the exam. But to replicate that skill without overconfidence, we need to cover these two aspects. Keep the answer very much in the context. Let us pick an example here. Let's say they've asked you a question about, they gave you a situation that so and so client is there, and in that client the auditor has checked up the transactions with respect to debtors. There are so many debtors ranging from 5 lakhs to 2 lakhs, 3 lakhs, and there are a lot of debtors ranging. But there is this one debtor who's ranging around 10 lakhs. Can we go for a negative confirmation? Can we go for a negative confirmation from this debtor? Now you know that you can take external confirmations. The moment they told you negative confirmation, you should identify that this belongs to standard number 505. All these are precise aspects. This is what is called keeping it in context. You need not write anything beyond what is required in 505. First of all, they said, can you go for a negative confirmation? Now normally, keeping this client aside, we can obviously take a negative confirmation. There is nothing wrong because it's allowed for us to take. But to take a negative confirmation, SA 505 says 5 conditions are to be complied. Now, all the marks for this question will be surrounding around those 5 points. Now, irrespective of whatever case content you write, there are so many debtors who are ranging in so many lakhs. 10 lakhs is a very big number. For big numbers, we can't take negative confirmation. I'd appreciate the answer, but that is not what I'm expecting. I am expecting you to quote that part of the standard which is going to help you get all those marks, and that will be straight out of the standard. Sir, should we keep the exact wording as it is, whatever the standard has told? Now, two things here again. Since we are talking about the length, should I write the entire standard as such? Should I quote standard number or section number? What words should I use? So this piece that I have put up here is a series of points that you have to focus. Sir, what are you talking? We are writing just a small 4 marks answer. Why should you think so much for those 4 marks or 6 marks? Guys, imagine how many 100 hours of preparation is going in, and all you get is 3 hours to present the entire thing. So how razor sharp you are supposed to be is something that you need to understand from that itself. You have put so many hours, how many hundreds of hours of preparation, but all you get is 3 hours to present that. So in that 3 hours, there is no scope for thinking slowly and then deciding what to write and then slowly trying to discuss the presentation. That much time is not there over there. But like I said, you need to follow the same thing. First, figure out what is the answer. Okay, you figured out what is the standard number or section number. Most people doubt, should I quote standard number, section number? Absolutely. Now, like, how do you feel if somebody calls you without your name? Right? When somebody is addressing us without our name, generally, you call it. It's not a very appropriate way of calling it. So if a standard has a number, if a section has a number, it is better that we address. Now, I know, I do understand your problem. Sir, we have lot of standards and section numbers. How do we remember? One, obviously practice and revision, which keeps on going. Two, if you forget in the exam, do not quote wrong numbers. When you are very clear that you don't know anything about it, the last best thing that you can do there is to quote as per the standards and auditing issued by ICAI without the number, as per the provisions of the Companies Act, maximum, that is what you can do. But writing check it for yourself, writing a blanket statement like that, as per the provisions of Companies Act, so many hundreds of provisions are there in Companies Act, how are you just giving a blanket statement like that? Doesn't make sense. So try and make sure that is a list of points. See, when it comes to audit paper, you have sections from 128 to 138 which are about companies accounts, and 139 to 148 which are about company auditor sections. So I don't think it should be a trouble for you to remember these 20 sections, because anyway you are preparing these even for the law paper. So and then it comes to the standards. You have 38 standards on auditing. I do understand it's a little bigger number, but what you can do in these kind of standards is break them as per the series. 2 series deals with all basic aspects in audit. 3 series deals with planning and risk assessment. 5 series deals with audit evidence. 6 series deals with using the work of others. 7 series about reporting. 8 series about special audits. So when you do this, every time you want to recollect a standard number in your mind, you are not going with a probability of 1 by 38. Now, let's say they ask you a question about can we use the work of internal auditors? Now, see, first of all, you have to leave all the 38 standards and look at only that portion which is talking about using other people's work. Now, using other people's work is discussed in 6 series. I believe you are clear about it, 600, 610, 620. So now it is up to you to decide whether you know out of these 3. It's not 1 by 38 now, it's only 1 by 3. So like that, if you want to answer a question on reporting, only 6 standards are there in the 7 series, 1 by 6. 1 by 11 for audit evidence series. So group them into those slots, remember slot wise, and I think that will be a great deal of help for you. There are a lot of videos of mine where I am explaining how to remember certain things, how to remember each and every clause of professional ethics, right? Post this session you can search along with my name on YouTube. You will find so many of those videos where I have explained all those techniques which can make your life more easy in the exam. You can try and do that. We'll get to answering this part. So now, should we write section number or standard number or even the clause number for an answer in professional ethics? I would say definitely yes, it is very much merited. Should we use the same words as they are described in a section, standard or a clause? Preferably, if you can. Now, lot of people come back with a complaint saying that, sir, we don't have the habit of by-hearting. So we don't want to exactly write the wordings as it is because they don't sound right. Understood? We don't want to do that. We don't want to exactly go ahead and do this. Sir, then what is the next thing that we can do? You can keep the context in mind. Some of those words are not replaceable, like say negative confirmation. You can't replace that word negative confirmation. You can't replace the word related parties. You can't replace the word arm's length price. Like that, there are certain critical terms in every standard which can't be replaced. Keep them, right? Use the words like management, those charged with governance. Don't write people in the entity. People in the entity is a very broad statement. So use the words correctly. Complain to higher authorities. Now, who are higher authorities? That doesn't sound right. So use the auditor shall communicate to those charged with governance. These are the words used in standard, and when you can try and replicate using those words, not the entire sentence framing or not the entire paragraph as it is. Definitions, if you can remember, I'd appreciate so much. But even if not, people don't worry about grammar. Remember that, right? They want the answer. But having said that, grammar is also very important when it comes to subjects like audit and law, because and or these words can change the entire meaning of that statement, which is why I am telling you need to be focused while writing. Decent sentence framing is good enough, but grammatical variations are very important because some expressions completely change the meaning of the answer. So thereby be precise to the extent possible. Some people are constantly in the doubt, should I replicate everything as it is told in the study material or practice manual? Not required. It's not kind of possible also. I mean, and our ability to by heart an answer and express that in the exam is not tested. At least at final level, you have questions which are absolutely concept based. So go by a flow of events where I'm going to give you this now. Like say for example, a question comes with a standard in context or a section in context or any professional ethics question. You can do 4-step answering. What are that 4-step answering technique? Let me give you those 4 steps here. It's kind of easy for you to understand later on how you can work around that. The 4-step answering part. First and foremost thing, identify standard on auditing or section, or probably you can even identify the clause, which is what I need you to do. Identify the section, standard or the clause. Then explain the section, standard or clause. I'm going to give you an example. Let me first write down all the 4 steps. Identify the standard, section or clause. Explain the standard, section or the clause. Then mark relevance to the question. This is very important. Relevance to the question. What are you talking about in the context of this standard to this question, this section to this question? Then in the relevance to the question, you will explain the case facts, what they gave versus what is happening, and then comes the conclusion. That is, let's say in a professional ethics question, is the auditor guilty or not guilty? right, whatever in this particular manner. Now let me pick up an example for this case. As I told you, we are going to write a question. Let us continue the same example of negative confirmation. First, identify standard as per SA 505. The above question is dealt in SA 505. First, make a mention of that. Identify the standard SA 505. Then what does SA 505 talk about? As per SA 505, the auditor shall obtain positive or negative confirmations. There are two ways of obtaining confirmation. So positive or negative confirmation, we can actually pick up that. And once you get that positive or negative confirmation, then write relevant to the question. In this given question, the auditor is preferring to obtain a negative confirmation. However, as per SA 505, negative confirmation can be obtained only in these 5 instances. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All the 5 conditions. Since the item is not of small amount, the auditor cannot obtain negative confirmation or whatever can obtain. Likewise in professional ethics, identify the clause. So let's say for example, he didn't communicate the previous auditor. You say this particular question deals with clause 8 part 1 of schedule 1. As per clause 8 part 1 schedule 1, an auditor is a chartered accountant in practice found guilty of misconduct if he fails to communicate with the predecessor auditor. Okay, very good. You explain what is the clause and you explain what is the content of the clause. Once both these are done, now see what happened in the question. In the given situation, so and so auditor has communicated, has not communicated, whatever they told. If he has communicated, therefore the auditor is not guilty of misconduct. If he has not communicated, hence the auditor is guilty of misconduct. Now, when you write all this, don't put any side headings. Provision, the thing, then explanation to the provision, case facts, conclusion. Don't put any side headings, but break the answer into 4 parts and write. Sir, we have a habit of putting side headings. It's up to you, but I am saying you don't really need to put the side headings like that, right? Like section, relevant section, facts of the case. You don't have to give a side heading like that. Simply, you can make the answer split into 4 points and or 4 paragraph wise, and make sure that you, even if this part where you are explaining the case facts, if it is going to stretch beyond 1 point, always write in points. Don't write 4 paragraphs of big context. Okay, make sure that you write. No sir, in suggested answers and practice manual we have seen that they are giving all the answer together at one place. Even when you read your answer together at one place, it will be like that only. But having said that, it's very important to break the answer in this way because of the reader's comfort. When the examiner is reading, the moment he sees Acha, clause 8 part 1 schedule 1, you got your mark, because he is very clear that the one writing the answer knows what they are writing and they are not simply blabbering something. So this piece I am asking you to do only because you want to get that first impression right. Okay, and then kind of explain this provision correctly. That is giving 50% of everything that is required in the question to the examiner, saying that yes, I am very clear about what the question is and I am in the right track. Once you give this confidence to the reader, then he will read your answer with a little more care and caution to see, okay, they don't deduct any marks unnecessarily. And that's how you end up scoring 3 out of 4 or 3.5 out of 4. Otherwise, there is no way how you write a clumsy answer and score those marks. Again, I am reminding the fact that do not put yourself in the position of an auditor while writing the exam. Sit as a student there and try to explain somebody who is unaware of this answer. If you are explaining them, with what clarity you will explain, give that much clarity. It's a topmost priority. Okay, and for 9 out of 10 questions in your audit paper, you can follow this technique. This is the 4-step technique, which is the best presentation that you can adopt for any answer of professional ethics, relating to standards, relating to company audit, relating to CARO, everything relating to a section, standard, clause, CARO's clause, everything can be answered in the same manner. Barring this, there may be few more questions that can come in the exam, which are in the nature of questions from consolidated financial statements, questions from the other areas, audit of banks, other areas, audit of NBFCs. There you can write straight answers as to what is the question and what exactly will be your answer in that context. And in that also try to answer in points. Every answer, the more you keep it in points, And I don't have to tell you guys, you are in final, so don't juggle using different color pens. Do not try to underline with a different color pen, write in black and underline. Don't do all that. Okay? If you are willing to underline or highlight, put something in the box, use the same pen that you are dealing with. And one common question that I always get from students is, sir, should we draw any summaries of a standard or a particular part, a T-shaped table? Do we have to clarify that in the exam? Now this totally is the choice of the student. I am not denying the fact. If you have that extra half a minute's time, you can easily do that. Now if they've asked you about confirmations, all you can do is again say essay 505, put that in the page and then take two branches, positive, negative. That's all. You're not going to explain anything beyond that. Don't take a scale, draw boxes, try to make it very attractive, and all that is not required. Because you're not going to get extra marks for this. But by doing this, you are attracting the attention of examiners, saying that what you know is right. And sometimes people end up doing wrong answers here. And because of that wrong answer, it attracts more attention. So do not ever do that. Okay, so where there are questions which are straight from other topics other than company audit, standards, Caro or professional ethics, you can follow a point-wise answering technique. And for all major part, out of the 70 marks, at least 50 marks of answers you can write in this manner. Because that's predominantly what is going to be your question paper. And always try and focus to write for 100 marks. Because if you want to score high, you always have to write for 100 marks. Again, writing 100 marks doesn't mean putting a heading and writing some content just for the satisfaction that you wrote an answer. No. If you are very sure about writing an answer, then you can go with it. If not, you can, kind of leave that answer. And since I've talked about leaving a particular answer, do not really worry about it. If you write the exam for 96 marks, where you left a 4 marks question because you know nothing about it, it's okay. Don't worry. But don't keep bringing it down. 96 becomes 92, 92 becomes 88. Then you wrote itself only for 60 or 70 marks and you are expecting to get 40s or 50s out of that is a slightly tough task. Not because, see, like if you are very confident, I'm writing 80% of every answer correct. So every time whatever I write, even if I write for 70 marks, 80% of my 70 marks is correct, I should get 55 or 56. It's good. But sometimes it may not happen and there can, kind of be a tension till the time you get the result. So don't do that. Try and make sure that you always keep up your spirits to write for 100 marks. And if you are doing that, that itself is a big confidence booster that you're going to get great marks. And the audit should not take the whole of 180 minutes to, kind of rush through. So make sure that you have at least a small slot of 5 minutes towards the end where you can, recheck everything. Because you don't have to really worry about this 30 marks, once done will be done. These 70 marks, if at all it's possible for you to finish the exam 5 minutes before the stipulated time and have a complete relook of it, it will be amazing. If you don't do it also, it's still fine. If you don't want to go and revisit an answer and take tension of it, once written, you can simply leave it as well. It's not going to harm you. So one last thing that I would want to tell you in the exam, what you have to concentrate is again the order. Some people are messing up this because of which they are losing marks. I have seen certified copies of some students. They write 5A and 5B in one place. Then 5C, they left it there. They wrote it somewhere else. Okay, this can be done. Should not be done ideally. But okay, in the worst of the circumstances, examiner may consider. I am saying may. There is no examiner will consider. May consider to give you. They don't want a student to fail. So probably if your 5C gets 1 or 2 marks, they will add that also to the 5th question. Because you can start with any question and answer, but the internal order has to be there. If you use internal order in the sense, if you write question number 5, all the sub-bits of question number 5 should be written there. Now you can write 5B, 5A, 5C in whatever order you want, but all the sub-bits of 5 at one place. Well, I have seen people 5A, 5B, then 5C elsewhere. And then later they are like, sir, I wrote 5C very well, actually I should have written it here only. Examiner will consider, they will give that benefit to the student, hopefully, but they are not obligated to. So if they deduct the marks, you can't go and question, my 5C was right, why you didn't give? You missed the order, so they are not obligated to give you. If they are a little concerned about you, they might give you. And not only that, some people do this weird thing. They write 5A, then they don't know 5B, so they leave place for that. And then 5C, they'll write the answer. Okay. So 5A and 5B you answered, and let's say this is in the beginning of the paper. Okay, you left place for 5B and you went. Now you went ahead, you finished the exam, you did everything, and after all the answers were done, you came back to 5B, and because you saw there is empty place, you want to fill something. Not because you know the answer, with your creative brilliance. Something you want to create and fill that space so that it doesn't look empty. So you wrote some content which is definitely not the answer. Okay, this is just to satisfy our ego, or just satisfy and come out saying I didn't leave anything. Never do that. When you don't know an answer completely, you have no idea about it, don't write some unnecessary crap. Or you do one thing, don't write 5B here, you are anyway taking a chance. No, write towards the end. They will give you marks for this and marks for this, and if they want to give marks for 5B based on what you wrote, let them give. If they don't give also, you should not really worry about it. But let me tell you the serious impact of writing wrong answers here in between. It spoils the entire flow. You came back after the entire exam because your 5A is right, 5C is right, and you wrote so many more answers correctly here. But when the examiner reads, he will not read in the order of what you wrote, no? Because he doesn't know whether you wrote 5B in the beginning of the exam or in the end of the exam. He won't know. And you are not going to write a note there. So be very careful. Because this, when he reads, it will disturb the entire flow of the question paper. Till here you have been answering very well. Further also you answered very well. But once they read this in between, they'll get to know that you are capable of writing wrong answers also in between like this. And then what you are doing is to attract unwanted attention of the examiner so much into the other questions. So I'm not saying purposefully they'll deduct marks and all that, but now they'll be more cautious with your paper because of 5B, wherein you exercised your creative brilliance in writing that wrong answer. So don't do such things. Don't indulge into leaving place and coming back and filling with something creative. If you want to leave place and come back and write the correct answer, you want to take some time and write, do that. Don't spoil the flow. Think from the perspective of the person who is reading your paper, and then I think that will sum up. And make sure that you have all the essentials for the exam, right? Presentation is a very key factor in papers like audit and law. So I'm not going to draw much of a time from the next session. So I hope to the extent possible with this limited time that we had, I think I was able to cover most of it for MCQs, descriptive part, and then the presentation pattern, and also I think major points that generally students have doubts, I think I was able to address. If at all I haven't addressed something, possibly the next time when we meet, we will make sure that we try and deal with that. So yeah, again at this point of time, all you need is patience, guys, because I do know the exams are extended, and lot of people are losing the interest. Because no, I think you should not look at it in a negative way, look it back at a positive sense, and think that you are rewarded with some extra time. So try and make sure that you use this extra time to your advantage. I do know some of the final students who are getting back to work or doing work from home and all that. Use your additional time that you are, spare time that you save from travel and all that in studies. Make sure that, because when the attempt comes, it will not come, just like this. So it's going to come with all the force. So we have to be prepared. Suddenly, if you wake up again mid-June and you'll be like, I didn't do all this, I wasted a lot of time, it will be a late realization. So make sure, and also keep your health in context. Please do not wander around here and there. It's very important to stay back home right now. And as long as I do understand sometimes it gets very monotonous and boring, but stick to the basics. We are going to see, the numbers rise and all different, researchers are telling different things. So make sure that you stay back home and stay safe, follow all the patterns of preparation and presentation, and I wish you all the best so that you can perform very well in the exam, and I hope all of you come out with great marks.